Anyone can turn this into this, and all you need are these materials.
Vascotoys. Action figure, dioramas, and props.
Here are two types of oil barrels you can buy at the store. The one on the left is from Dollar General, the one on the right is from Dollar Tree. Let's take a closer look at the Dollar Tree version, which is what I used to use when I first started making dioramas. These barrels have stickers on the top and the sides of them, which are a huge pain to try and remove, so these are not my favorite to use. The Dollar General version, on the other hand, is much easier to work with because it doesn't have any stickers on it. It just has some plastic wrap that can easily be taken off. There's also a slight height difference between these two, with the Dollar General version being taller. I'm going to use the Dollar General version the rest of the way, so the first thing I have to do is remove that plastic wrap, which really easily comes off. Once you remove it, the next thing to do is to pop the lid off, and you can see there's some slime in there. Toss it, we won't be needing it. It should come right out, which leads us to our next step. Sanding. I'm using 80 grit sandpaper, some goggles, and a sanding mask just to be extra safe as I sand. I also really like these nail files for sanding. They just are easier to work with, and they come in handy for trying to get the lip of this lid. If you want to pick those up or anything else that I'm using in this tutorial, check out the Amazon links in the description of the video. I also want to mention before I get any further that I learned how to do this from watching Henry Beltran's YouTube video, which I'll link to in the card of the video so you guys can check his video out too. For this step, you don't have to apply a lot of force. You just kind of want to get as good a coverage as you possibly can. And I do try to work in the same direction if I can and try to get full coverage as I go from one section to the next. The reason we're doing this is because we're going to spray paint these oil barrels, and we want that spray paint to stick to the plastic. So sanding it down is going to help that happen. Here's how the barrel looks after it's been fully sanded. You can see the silly slime logo is completely faded. If you'd like, also remove the sticker at the bottom at this point. Next, I take the oil barrels outside where I'm going to use Rust-Oleum black spray paint to prime them. I let the barrels dry for 10 to 20 minutes, bring them in, and now we're going to sponge paint these. You can use a regular sponge or a sponge brush. I'm going to go ahead and use a regular sponge for this, which, by the way, I'm not the best about keeping my sponges clean, so you can see it's pretty gross, pretty dirty, but it still does the job. I'm using a similar technique that I would when I dry brush. I'm patting down some of the paint onto a paper towel before applying it to the oil barrel. I intentionally base coated these in black because I wanted them to look older, and I feel like painting this way makes the oil barrel look like it's an older, dirtier barrel. After I finish the top section and I let it dry for a little bit, then I know I can touch it, and I go ahead and I paint the bottom portion of the barrel. Back to my point about the base coat, if you guys didn't want this to look dirty, or if you wanted it to be a different color, like if I wanted to do a white barrel, I would just spray paint this white and then weather directly on the white and basically have that priming coat actually be the color of the oil barrel that I want. So with this, it's a little bit more of a dull color because we have the black coming through the bottom. So again, if you did want to do the sponge painting method and you didn't want it to be so subdued, you can just do another layer of sponge brushing on top of that and get a much more solid and vibrant color on the barrel. You got to remember to paint the bottom of these as well, because if you're using these for ACBA and the oil barrel is toppled over for some reason or it's on a rack, you want it to be consistent to the color of the whole barrel. So I'm just using that blotting method to make sure that I get full coverage on the bottom, and then I'm going to go ahead and let this dry before getting to the next step. It really doesn't take long at all for these to dry, but after it has dried, this is what it's looking like. So we've got full coverage, we see some color variation because of the black undertones, and I think we're off to a really good start. It's time to weather these up. I'm going to start out with Anita's Red Rust. You could continue using a sponge for this part, but I'm going to opt for a paintbrush. This is the point where you can really let your creativity out. You can do so many different combinations of how you paint these up, how you rust them up, how you weather them, and it all really just depends on what you're looking for. Sometimes I'll paint these as if there was an oil spill and one of the sides has been kind of covered with oil and wasn't properly cleaned. Sometimes I like to get kind of a full dirty effect across the whole piece. It really just depends on what you want to do. And I mean, there's times where I want to have clean oil barrels or a customer wants a clean oil barrel. So that's really the beauty of this. Once I'm satisfied, I let that first coat dry. Then we're going to do a second coat or a second pass at this where I'm not going to blot this out on the paper towel first. I'm just going to go ahead and get the paintbrush nice and wet and then apply it directly on to give the effect that there was a heavier layer of rust on parts of this. I want to point out a little area right here where you guys can see a big section of the black is kind of coming through because I smudged off some of the paint with the brush. I think that actually adds to the effect that I'm going for here, but if you don't want that to happen, you would just simply seal this with a polyurethane spray before moving on to this rusting step, and you would avoid that. I painted up 2 of these so I could show you guys the difference of what you can do with how you weather these up. So this one has weathering and rust on really just the one side, and if you go around, you see the rest of it's pretty much clean. And if we move over to this one, you can see there's more even rusting throughout the piece, which I did on purpose. I wanted them to look different because if they all looked the same, that would be boring because that's not the way it would really be. So I feel like adding that variation will add to your diorama setups. The last paint application that I'm going to do here is using some brown to just make these generally dirty. So we've already got the rust, now let's add some dirt. For this step, I like to start at the bottom of the barrel because if this was sitting on the ground over time, it would definitely accumulate dirt from the ground up, especially if things are getting kicked up in a warehouse or an alley or wherever this thing might be. Now I just work from the bottom up, applying varying levels of intensity on the paint application to give somewhat of a fading effect from dirt to blue. And again, have fun with this, paint this the way that you want to, that fits the scene that you're trying to build or fits the scenario that you're trying to fit in your diorama. And for me, that's going to do it for the paint applications. You guys can see the difference that we got on the 2 of these. We've got some rust, we've got some dirt, and overall, I'm really happy with the way these are looking. And apparently, Spider-Man's also impressed. I'm going to finish these off by sealing them with Miniwax polyurethane clear satin spray. This is my sealer of choice for all of my diorama pieces, but I'm going to do this a little differently than how I do my foam sealing. With foam, you don't want to be this close, but this is plastic, so there's really no risk of me damaging these the way that there would be with the aerosol spray on the foam. So I get a little bit closer and I make sure that I get full coverage on these so we can preserve the paint and don't have any issues as we're having fun with these in our diorama setups in our ACBA scenes. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel so you can see all of the awesome action figure dioramas and props that we'll be making.